Hello, friends. Welcome to Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is 2025's top 100 3PLs, how logistics giants are confronting uncertainty with my friend Seth Clevenger. How's it going, Seth?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Always enjoy these conversations.
I do too. We did the similar topic last year. So, Seth, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, I'm Seth Clevenger, Managing Editor of Features and Multimedia at Transport Topics, calling in from Washington, D.C., from the office right downtown. D.C., we're about a block away from the Washington Nationals ballpark, which is a fun place to be in the summer. I've been at TT for about 14 years now, so it's been a great run.
So what is, for people living under a rock, what does Transport Topics do?
Yeah, we cover all things trucking and freight transportation in North America. Our primary focus is domestic trucking. We do get into 3PLs, of course, a little bit into global international trade and freight. But really our core audience is leadership, management level at trucking companies, logistics companies, 3PLs, supply chain folks at shippers. The people who are really decision makers in the transportation industry, that's our audience. That's who we're serving. What are the trends? What are the technologies that they need to stay on top of to really run their businesses well? How are regulations affecting the industry, legislation? And we're right here in DC. We cover what's happening on Capitol Hill and FMCSA and DOT as a big part of a service we provide to our readers. We're weekly in print in the year 2025. So we have our subscribers who have the print publication in their mailboxes, their physical mailboxes weekly, as well as digitally. We're online at ttnews.com. And more and more multimedia as well these days. I have a podcast of my own called TT RoadSigns. It's available through all the usual channels.
Yep. And we'll make sure we put a link to your podcast and a link to all these lists that we're going to discuss today. Yeah. There's a lot of companies that are glommed in as media companies, including the logistics of logistics. But we'll say I started the logistics of logistics as a blogger. And when I first started writing as a blogger, I was like, I'm writing an article, I'm writing a blog. Was one and the same. And then over time, I started saying I'm a blogger and drawing a line as blogs tend to be a little more opinionated. It's a point of view. It doesn't usually say this is all fact. It doesn't have the rigor of journalism. And Transport Topics is truly journalists in this space. And there is a difference because we're all creating more content than ever before. It's easy to create a podcast, easy to create YouTube videos. And it's not easy to write, but using AI, a lot of people are writing very quickly content. And I'm not saying it, I'm all for that. I'm a content creator. I'm all for the idea that we create content, but there's a difference between, I don't know, the bloggers and the opinion pieces for people who have day jobs and the actual journalists who are putting in actual research time. I used to say, I researched that. And then I would go, I Googled it.
That is the research. When people say they researched it, that's usually what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Google wouldn't be considered research for a real researcher. It's not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong.
It's a starting point. Yeah, it's fine. But it is an interesting landscape that we operate in, this media world, specifically in the transportation industry. And I certainly think there's a place for all of this, whether it's a blog, whether it's podcasts. Pretty much traditional journalism is what we do at Transport Topics, to your point, both in print and digitally. And there's certainly a need and an appetite for all of that this exchange of ideas and information and facts to hopefully lead people to manage their businesses better.
Yep.
In our case.
Seth, I saw you at the Trimble conference last year in Vegas, and I remember we had a chance to meet with the senior executives from Trimble. And I remember sitting there with all the media people, air quotes on all the media people, and meaning you had actually studied a lot of what they were doing, and you had questions that I was like, all right, Seth, go. I'll just back up because I don't know. I don't know that question to ask. Again, there is a place, and you notice it really quickly when you put the real journalists next to the podcasters.
I think part of that is also I've been covering Trimble basically since their entrance into the transportation industry. So it's been years that I've seen the company evolve. So that's something that's maybe just the benefit of being in the industry for
I'll see you at
the
their
amount of time.
conference again this year then.
Yep, I'll be there.
Yep. Everything we're talking about today, I will make sure I put in the show notes. So we're going to talk about a lot of the lists that you guys create. You create a list of the top 100 logistics companies. We'll go over that. But you also the top 100 freight brokerages, dry storage. I'm looking here, refrigerated, dedicated, ocean freight, air freight. You've got it all. It's not easy to track all this stuff. We'll get into that in a little more detail in a minute. But tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the juggernaut that is Transport Topics.
Yeah, I'm originally from Northwest Ohio, small town outside of Lima, Ohio.
Oh, I got
People
family down there.
people pass through it mostly, either on the way to Chicago or maybe on I-75 between basically Detroit to
My
Cincinnati.
aunt's from there.
So it's where I grew up, actually in a small family farm, and went to school in Miami of Ohio, down by Cincinnati. And as soon as I graduated, I was like, I want to move somewhere new, I want to see something new, and applied for jobs really all over the country. Wound up in Delaware, of all places, for what I thought would be 2 or 3 years, ended up being 6 years during the Great Recession. That kind of just hold on and keep doing what you're doing if you have a job. But from there, I got into the trade press. So I've been in the greater DC area now for about 14 years, all with transport topics. So I started out of college, I was covering local news, right? So city council meetings, school board meetings, high school sports, even local businesses, all that stuff. So it was very much kind of general assignment. That was a good way to, wouldn't say it was lucrative, right? But it was a good way to just break into the industry and learn. And it was a good experience. But I do really like the trade press. I like business. I like technology. I like the conversation that happens among management level folks at businesses. That to me, it just feels like a really good landing spot for me, which is why I've been in it for as long as I have. I'm far more interested in covering the future of this industry than I was sitting through city council meetings, planning and zoning meetings. It was pretty dry.
Our industry is moving fast right now. And I noticed your title changed. Last year, I think you're managing editor of features, which we're going to talk about features, but now it's features, managing editor of features and multimedia. So you got more responsibility over there.
Yeah, doing more and more multimedia these days, in addition to our own podcast I mentioned. And typically we're every other week. Lately, every week, actually. I co-host that with my colleague, Michael Fries, who does handle the host duties from time to time as well. Beyond that, we have a few other multimedia programs. One is called TT Newsmakers. That's a video format interview with somebody who's high profile or making news in the transportation industry, or as a topic that's really front and center, for example. So that's an example of some of the things we do. Also head up some of our webinars as well. So it's become a bigger part of my job, hence the title change. It keeps me busy, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
I love it. I love it. So every year you guys put out this list. And again, I'll put a link to all of this in the show notes. And I'll also put a link to Seth's website and his LinkedIn profile and any other links his marketing people give me. You put out this list every year. Is it April it goes out?
That's right. The top 100 logistics companies list. We actually do align the release date with TIA, the Transportation Intermediaries Association, has their annual conference in April, and we actually unveil the list at TIA on stage. So we always align that so that it's published basically as I'm going on stage at TIA. So that was just a couple months back this year.
So I'm looking at these rankings, and I'll get us started here. Maybe we'll just start with talking about the top 10. And this is the biggest logistics companies. And again, I know you live in a world of weird nuance and uncertainty. And it's ambiguous. That's what it is. It's because I know somebody's listening going, that's not the biggest logistics company. Seth says it is, and he'll explain why.
Yeah.
He has rationale. But the biggest company is Amazon, and that's the same as last year. And by the way, we have last year's ranks right on your list here. The second biggest company, C.H. Robinson, up there in Minnesota. Then we have a change in the 3 spot. You have GXO Logistics, number 3 this year. Now that's a spinoff of XPO. That's the brokerage side.
GXO is the contract logistics.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's the
And
warehousing
the
side.
brokerage spinoff is RXO, which is also on the list a little bit further down.
So we had a big jump up with number 3, which is GXO. What caused it to go from number 5 to number 3 this year?
Yeah, GXO is really big in e-commerce fulfillment, and I would say that it was actually more of a call it 3 or 4 companies that were very closely bunched, and one kinda is like nose and one edged ahead of the other. I wouldn't describe it as any sort of massive sea change in the top 10, but it is notable when you see that growth. And I should mention that it was really a mixed bag. This list is based on full year revenue for the prior year, calendar year 2024.
You can't do it for this year,
Right. These
obviously.
are yes, we're only halfway through and we're only
You're good, but
one
you're not
first
that good.
quarter. Yeah, exactly. Can't project based on that quite yet. Not maybe AI at some point will allow us to do that, but we're not there yet. But the rankings, to be clear, are not subjective. Like it's not just companies that we like or we think provide the best services. These are the largest companies based on full year revenue. So it's very cut and dried. There is a little bit of an art to it because we are relying on companies providing data if they're privately held, and many of them are. So we have to, in some cases, come up with estimates, but it's meant to be a ranking. Largest 3PLs based on revenue. Most of these companies is pretty flat from year to year, and that's coming off a down year. 2023 was rough, and unfortunately, I meant that 2024 wasn't a whole lot better. When you look at the revenue, some of these companies posted declining revenues from 2023. Others grew a little bit. GXO is one that actually had some pretty nice growth in 2024. They had about 20% revenue growth.
Was that all organic?
Yes, I believe that was mostly organic. No big acquisitions during that time that immediately come to mind, at least. So they really grew, and that was enough for them to nose ahead. Barely. We're talking like 11.7 billion for GXO versus about 11.4 for JB Hunt at number 4.
So JB Hunt, which is number 4 this year, was number 3 last year. But to get to your point, they were very close to keeping their number 3 ranking. God, it's funny. These companies are all so big. It's not, nobody's losing sleep. Nobody's shedding tears for these fellas. I know everybody there, though, is working hard. So we have JB Hunt is number 4. And again, they were number 3 last year. Now, when we call this list logistics company, and I know there's another list that freight brokers. So I think
What do we mean by logistics? I think it's helpful.
what do we mean by logistics?
The main top 100 list is very all inclusive. It's a very broad view of logistics. And even the term logistics is so fuzzy. The lines are blurred. I do remember when UPS, primarily in parcel package delivery, really used logistics as their tagline. Within our industry, I think we are increasingly associating that with freight brokers, of course, warehousing, contract logistics providers. But even those, right? Warehouse contract logistics is one bucket, freight brokerage is another. These are very different types of companies, but we consider them both logistics, freight forwarders with international freight. These are all companies that provide various forms of 3PL services, supply chain management, even like 4PL providers, supply chain orchestration. It's such a big umbrella, and we have this top 100 list that's all inclusive, and then we do segment it into silos for the industry sector list that we have as part of the same publication. So we do actually look at the largest brokers, the largest forwarders, ocean and air, and the largest warehousing providers, dry storage and refrigerated, as separate categories. The main top 100 list is all of them, which is why you see Amazon and C.H. Robinson right next to each other.
Yeah, I get that. And by the way, when I say logistics, I always think logistics is the overall overarching, and underneath it is transportation, could be its own bucket. And then I could say warehousing. I know some people would call warehouses third-party logistics warehousing. I say transportation, warehousing, and then I guess freight brokers get their own. And I think in a lot of ways you could call logistics the overall category, or also the smaller L. But you guys are dealing with this challenge. But anyway, getting back to your list, number 1, Amazon. Number 2, Robinson. Number 3, GXO. Number 4, JB Hunt. Number 5 is UPS Supply Chain. Now, I know this is another challenge for you guys. So UPS Supply Chain was number 4 last year, number 5 this year. That's not all UPS, though, is it?
It is not. No, we are definitely spinning out the huge gargantuan package delivery business there. This is looking at the supply chain solutions division. So this is the part of UPS that handles freight forwarding, warehousing and distribution, customs brokerage, various logistics services of that nature. And that's a very significant business for UPS, but it's just one segment of this huge company. It's less than a fifth of UPS.
So now, why wouldn't UPS get in here if we have Amazon in here?
I'll say the same thing about Amazon. That is not Amazon's total top line revenue, despite the huge number. It's a little less than a quarter of Amazon. That's the figure that we're.
So where does their whole company?
It would be huge, right? It would be off the charts huge because they're primarily a retailer, right? That's the core business. They're an online retailer. But to support that business, they've created this enormous e-commerce fulfillment network, warehousing. They have a brokerage business. They have all kinds of 3PL services now.
They're delivering for people,
right? And they're the final mile, like the prime trucks that we all see and think about, are primarily independent contractors. They have a partner carrier program. They have ocean freight customs brokerage through Amazon Global Logistics. There's a lot there. They're mostly there for the fulfillment by Amazon and multi-channel fulfillment segments of Amazon. And it's important to keep in mind that Amazon is not just providing logistics for stuff that they are selling sold by Amazon, right? There's so many third parties that sell on the Amazon platform that Amazon handles their logistics for them. They're a 3PL in that case. And there are also companies that are selling on other platforms, right? They're doing logistics for companies that don't even sell on Amazon.com.
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to. It's imperfect, but that's what we're trying to capture here. And they don't break it out perfectly in their earnings, but these are the third-party seller services. That's the estimate. That's the figure that we're using. And even if it's less than we think it is, they're easily number one. So that's what we have them at that spot.
Yeah, and I think what you guys do, and again, I'd say this is the difference between real research and Google research, is that you're consistent. So how you did it last year, your criteria, if it changes at all, you guys always reference why this is different from last year. We made a decision on the criteria, and because it is not easy to start splitting hairs in some of this.
You can split the hairs different ways. Yeah, you can apply different criteria and come up with a different list for sure.
So getting back to it, we got number 1, Amazon, then C.H. Robinson, GXO, which jumped up from 5 to 3. Then we get JB Hunt, UPS Supply Chain Solutions. Then we get Expeditors International of Washington. Now, that's a huge company that sometimes flies a little under the radar. Please explain this one.
Yep, they're a big freight forwarder, and it's freight forwarders do a ton of business. And a point of interest is that during the pandemic and then the rebound from the pandemic and then the cool down since, forwarders are actually the ones that see the biggest ups and downs in total top line revenue. So there was times, I think I'd have to go back and double check this, but Expeditors was quite a bit higher on our list for a couple of years there, like right around 2021, based on this huge demand for their services. And then when things really started to dry up, they really came back down to earth. So the ebbs and flows, we probably see it the strongest with the international freight forwarders like Expeditors.
Yep. And then the next on the list is Kuehne+Nagel North America. So they have, please explain that one.
Yeah. So we are trying to make this a North American list, right? So this is also imperfect in such a global world and a global economy, but the way we try to limit this is to your North American business. An exception to that might be a company that's primarily based in North America and headquartered in North America. We may pull in your global data there, your global revenue there, if that's what we have and that's the best we have. In cases where it's an international company like Kuehne+Nagel's based in Switzerland, What we want to do is get either their North American data or the closest approximation we can get for that. So that's what you're seeing on our list is their North American division.
And Kuehne+Nagel they don't actually own the ships. They're
a forwarder. Yep.
They're a forwarder. Okay. So the next one on the list, Total Quality Logistics, which I think probably is also in the freight brokerage list. Am I right to say that?
They are indeed. Yep.
So now what's the difference between this where it says Total Quality Logistics? What's the difference between that and what I'll see on your top freight brokerage list?
Yeah, those will be pretty similar, but in some of these companies, it's not quite, the lines are blurred between services. So a TQL, a CH Robinson might be a better example of this, but they're primarily a freight broker, but they do have freight forwarding business, some other segments. So for the brokerage list, we're trying to segment the view of CH Robinson, which is the majority of it. TQL, I mean, they're a broker. They're a very large freight broker. There may be some other services, of course, but for each segment, we're doing our best to segment it. The data is imperfect, right? And especially in transportation, we know how data is such a challenge, but and in some cases, we do have to work on estimates, and we work with Armstrong and Associates on some of these. So they're a large consultant and research group focused on 3PLs. So we pool our resources, compare notes, and work together to come up with the best possible list.
Rounding out this list after Total Quality Logistics, number 10 is Armada Sunset Holdings. You tricked me. I don't know what that is. It's a huge company.
Yes. In our industry, I think that Sunset, which is the smaller piece of that, is probably better known in some ways because they're a freight brokerage, a large, successful freight brokerage.
I think I know everything until I talk to you, Seth.
They were acquired a couple years back by Armada Supply Chain Solutions, which is primarily a food and restaurant logistics firm. They're quite large. You pull those resources together, and they've grown to the point where they are now a top 10 logistics company in North America by our reckoning.
So now, again, we're going to stop at 10 for the top 100 logistics companies. You have 100 and where they were last year and where they are this year. I'm going to tell everybody, check out the list. I'll put it in the show notes. But now I want to switch gears. I want to talk about the top freight brokerages. So number 1 is CH Robinson. And I remember talking about the same thing last year. So they were number 1 last year. And so now number 2 is JB Hunt. Now, I know I asked you this last year. JB Hunt owns trucks. So is JB Hunt, is this just their brokerage business pulled out?
Yes, and there was a big change this year. And there was some internal debate our team and Armstrong a little bit about this. But to be consistent with other companies on the list, we this year viewed JB Hunt's intermodal services as part of their brokerage division. Other companies, that's what we've done. So to be consistent, we included that as well. It's not all of JB Hunt. It's not the asset-based trucking business portion, but for the intermodal logistics side of their operation, we're now including that. And I would think that we still think of JB Hunt sometimes as a kind of a traditional trucking company, but they've changed a lot, right? They were primarily intermodal. They're becoming truly a 3PL services like JB Hunt 360. The company's changed quite a bit over the years in line with how the economy has changed and how the industry has changed.
I think what's happened a lot is the trucking companies, even when I jumped into this industry, I'm from automotive originally. When I joined this industry in 2010, there was a lot of companies that would say, oh, we're a trucking company or we're a brokerage. Now it seems like every trucking company of any size says, let's get a brokerage because we're always looking for backhauls and I'm calling these other brokers. We might as well make some money, but it also allows them to better serve customers because if you have thousands of trucks, that seems, oh, that's easy. It's hard to cover the whole country with 1,000 trucks. A lot easier if you say, okay, I've got 1,000 trucks of my own, but we keep those on lanes that are predictable for us. Maybe they're dedicated or managed trans type business. But if you got to cover the whole country, boy, it's a lot easier if you can say, I've got a freight brokerage, a sister, another department down the hall.
Yeah, and right now, the last really 3 years has been a down freight market, and a key consideration for a lot of these companies that are, in some cases, heavily asset-based, maybe primarily asset-based trucking companies that have a brokerage division, and you could other ones that are maybe primarily brokerage and then asset light. Which freight opportunities, and they're maybe a little bit more limited than they were a few years ago, are you going to haul with your own equipment, and which ones are you going to broker out? That's a really important decision. Which business do you want to handle in house, and what do you want to broker out? So that's, and companies need to make those decisions correctly to survive in a really tight freight market.
Yeah, and you guys cover this a lot of times. I've seen over the last decade traditional trucking companies that built a brokerage and then said, let's get rid of the trucks.
Yeah.
And I get it, because it's just, this is a grind. I think I always say on the podcast, I ask people like you, Seth, tell me when the market's going to move up. And for a long time, it was like, I think by the end of this year. I heard that in 2023. I heard it in 2024. And now people are just going, who knows? It's hard.
Yeah. There were some positive signs, I think, at the end of last year, heading into 2025. Of course, we all know what happened, right? The tariffs, trade negotiations, trade policy. We'll see how it all plays out. But in the meantime, what it's done is created this massive amount of uncertainty. And that's really tough for businesses, right? When you don't know how to respond, you don't know how to plan for the future. So what happens is you wait and you help hold off on major decisions. In trucking, a lot of companies have been holding off on purchasing new trucks. They want to wait and see how things play out. What's the economy going to look like at the back end of this year? What's going to happen with the flow of freight, depending on where the tariffs land? Are we going to see major shifts in freight patterns? And if you're a business, you really need to know that. You need the dust to settle. I'm hoping that we'll see a lot of pent-up demand unleashed once we get to a point where we know what the global trade system looks like, and we have more confidence and certainty that we'll see that. But for the time being, it's still a really tough freight market. There was this surge of activity at the ports, imports, right at the start of the year to get ahead of the tariffs. Things will really slow down when we're talking 100% plus tariffs with China. The 90-day pause, still waiting for the data to be a little more clear on that, but sure, a lot of people taking that opportunity for freight coming from China, and you'll see that at the ports. And then the questions about cross-border freight too, right? We have USMCA, and that'll be up for review next year. And what's the tariff situation with Canada, with Mexico? It's just the uncertainty, the unknown, which has really stifled a lot of business planning.
Seth, I think I said it many times during COVID that I was reading a book. It was a book about, I think it was about Navy SEALs. I think it was fiction, but they used the term VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I said VUCA a million times during COVID. There's probably people sick and tired of me saying that, but I remember thinking when I first heard it, I was like, oh God, that is this business. And apparently I looked it up. It is a business term originally. Some management consultant came up with it. And when people have this VUCA in the air, they just stop. They say, I'm not going to buy that truck. I'm not going to hire that extra sales guy. I'm going to batten down the hatches and wait for the sun to shine.
Yeah, it applies again, right? We just went through this with COVID, and I think we're going through it in a very different form right now. And when will this be settled? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think I heard over the weekend, we're talking on June 9th, that there was some sort of China deal, but I don't know that that was a verbal or that's actually written down. But we'll say this, we know supply chains are repositioning. We're going to move stuff back from China, might move over to, and by the way, that was already happening because it was already happening. I think this was a little more urgency. And if we were talking a few years ago, we wouldn't be talking about Ukraine. We wouldn't be talking about the Middle East. We wouldn't be talking about repositioning supply chains. All of this added a whole bunch of VUCA to the decision making. So it's not easy. And by the way, it's hard for these big companies, probably even harder for the smaller companies that say, hey, look, we're not publicly traded. We don't have billions in the bank. They have to make decisions too, and probably with a lot less information.
Yeah. And I think that what's useful maybe going forward is to look at the policies that seem consistent, not just year to year, but even like administration to administration. So the decoupling with China, to your point, that's been happening. And when Biden was in office, he didn't just reverse all that. It was still a tough stance on China. So I would fully expect we'll see that trend continue. And we'll see markets like we had this nearshoring boom in Mexico. Now, that's been maybe questioned a bit with the tariffs, but I also think that a lot of investments have taken place, and that'll be a kind of a powerful force to keep that open, and especially as we look at a USMCA review process.
That's like NAFTA 2.0, right?
Yeah, NAFTA 2.0, and I guess you call it 2.5 when they get to the new.
Yes. Yeah. US. So that's United States, Canada, and Mexico. US
USMCA, yeah.
MCA, yeah, Mexico and Canada.
US, Mexico, Canada agreement.
Yeah.
So not the most creative acronym, but at least it's clear.
NAFTA 2.0 would have been good for me. But
NAFTA was a dirty word. So
oh yeah. And by the way, there's some people who still say that sent manufacturing jobs overseas, and it did. And I think what we're seeing now, we're decoupling, as you said, from China. They are no longer and have not been the lowest cost provider. But what they do have is the factories standing, the infrastructure set up, and the people there. As we move stuff back here, this repositioning of supply chains, I did some Googling over the weekend. I call that research. And I was just looking at what percentage of auto parts from this company come from overseas, what percent comes from China. And so in a lot of cases, you're not setting up a new factory to say, okay, I'm just going to have this made in Mexico rather than China. There was already a supplier down there. Actually setting up new factories, if I say I'm going to open a new factory in Arizona or Kentucky or Ohio, we got to make sure we get the infrastructure set up, which is not fast.
This is a long-term decision.
We have to have the energy set up. So you have to have the electrical infrastructure. You have to have the workforce development. Actually buying land and building a factory is much faster than all the other things that go into it. I can say this, I helped move supply chains to Asia in the 90s and beyond. But I spent a lot of time in China. Setting up that infrastructure was never easy there either. And the workforce development, you mentioned being from Ohio. Obviously, Ohio, big manufacturing state. I think in a lot of ways, the Midwest where I live, it is the birth of the supply chain here. But we're not set up necessarily to say, oh yeah, we're going to open a huge factory and we have green fields. No, that's not exactly how it's going to work. So I think initially you're going to see the big supply chain companies say, yeah, we moved that business from China to Vietnam or to Mexico to an existing supply chain.
Yes, that's more nimble.
So that's relatively easy compared to we're standing up a new supplier in Idaho.
Yeah. I think that to see a real shift in, call it reshored manufacturing, it's a long-term process.
It's a decade.
It takes a long time, and there would have to be consistency in the policies. If we have tariffs changing every month for the foreseeable future, clearly it's the question I think that supply chain planners, business people have now is trying to discern what's a negotiating tactic and what's a policy that's going to stick.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
It could create a long-term shift in freight patterns.
That's a great point because Trump can be very bombastic. And I think when he put these tariffs on on Mexico and Canada, everyone's like, we'll just no longer be able to work with them. They're our biggest trading partners, not China. In fact, it's these guys. And I think long term, we're going to have better relations and the cross-border is going to improve because it needs to. We have an enormous opportunity. And we're gonna take advantage of that. And again, I don't even think that's particularly political to your point because there is a long-term thing happening here where the US is saying, let's pull back. We don't need to be in every war. Let's try not to participate in all those. And then also, we don't have everybody with good jobs. Can we somehow move some of that work back here so we can take care of everybody here? Anyway, let's continue on. So we talked about C.H. Robinson, number one freight brokerage. And then J.B. Hunt, that's just the freight brokerage side, is number two. TQL, Total Quality Logistics, number three. Number four, WWEX Group. I don't know what that is. Well, who are they?
Worldwide Express. And
Yes, I know them. I know
that is the parent company with some other pieces that they've acquired over the years. So it's not really a new name, maybe just presented a little bit differently. And then you got Echo Global on there. So those are your standard, well-known, big brokers.
And then you have Echo Global at 5, then RXO. We just talked about their former sister company, GXO, is on the big list. I mean, that's their warehousing side.
And a point of interest about RXO, they have acquired Coyote Logistics from UPS. That was a very closely watched spinoff. UPS initially signaled that it was interested in getting out of the freight brokerage business. The brokerage is tough, and sure enough, RXO was the buyer. So we don't have full visibility into how big that company will be when you can converge RXO's existing business that was spun off from XPO with Coyote. So I fully expect to see RXO climb that ranking next year when we have a full year of data as a unified company. So that's one to watch for next year. Will be higher than number 6 on our list.
Yeah, and also we should mention for the kids, Coyote Logistics, based in Chicago, was a pioneer in this freight brokerage space. They did things differently. I think they have, where a lot of companies do cradle to grave. I think they were the first one, or one of the first ones, to set up the new way of doing freight brokerage. And don't have them off the top of my head, but if you look at the companies that came from Coyote, the founders, so even the sons of that founder have started a few companies, really successful companies, Molo and Cargado, Forager. So there's a whole bunch of companies that spun out of Coyote, not literally, but fantastic story. And so UPS bought them, and to your point, said, this is really hard. Let's not do this anymore. And so they sold it to RXO, and RXO is just brokerage. It's not, they were part of XPO and they had a whole bunch of other businesses tied to them. Not anymore. So
that was a
pure
big
play.
change. That was a big change several years back with XPO. And what Brad Jacobs put together originally was huge freight broker, huge contract logistics services and warehousing fulfillment business, acquired Conway, a big LTL carrier. So you have all these pieces put together, and over time just didn't feel that the market was giving them the premium that they felt it deserved. So they spun them off into pure play. So XPO today, LTL, they're an LTL carrier. RXO, freight broker, big freight broker. GXO, contract logistics fulfillment.
Yep. Conway's right by my house. I'm not too far from Ann Arbor, and it's right off the expressway. So I've seen the sign changes over time. Again, getting back to it, the biggest freight brokerages are C.H. Robinson, J.B. Hunt, TQL, Worldwide, Echo, RXO, Landstar, number 7, Mode, number 8, 9 is Schneider. Again, Schneider, I think, first and foremost, when you say Schneider, I think trucking company.
They're a trucking company primarily, but big brokerage.
Their freight brokerage business makes them the 9th largest freight brokerage.
Yeah, they're big.
Our perception of these companies is just always going to be flavored by
how they started and how they made their name. Yeah, JB Hunt that's probably the best example of it. But they're I would certainly describe them more as a 3PL than a traditional trucking company.
Yeah, everybody's doing that. And then number 10 on this list is Uber Freight. Let's talk about them for a minute. There's been some changes over there too.
Yes, sure. And they acquired Transplace a few years back, and it's not purely brokerage, but to have a more comprehensive logistics platform for carriers, for shippers. And Uber has invested a lot of money into that division. It's been interesting to watch that grow, but that's a big tech company that really went heavily into transportation, which is not something you see very often. But keep in mind that this is separate from, for a while they were in autonomous trucking development as a whole separate, flat rolled into Aurora, what's now Aurora. But this is the freight brokerage 3PL business of Uber.
Yeah, by the way, you mentioned something I think is interesting, which is investment in innovation. So I saw Ryder on your list. I think that was one of the top 100 logistics company. I talked to them. Where was that? At Manifest last year. And I did some interviews. I've been interviewed them a number of times. I've been a sponsor. And I know they have Ryder Ventures. So they're investing in interesting startups. And I talked to Gary, who lives not too far from me, and he's heads up a lot of that innovation. And they're always looking at investing in new businesses because they recognize we're really big and it's not easy for us to innovate when we're managing the supply chains of some of the biggest companies in the world. We'll innovate offline in this little company. And if it starts to work out, we'll incorporate. And they're probably not the only ones doing that. And so it's these, I think this is brand new behavior. If I was to go back 15, 20 years ago, a trucking company was looked at, right or wrong, I think probably as a very unsophisticated business. Not anymore. These companies are investing in technology, obviously, in not only their trucks, but also in their operations and venture capital arms, making investments in innovation. It's just that if you were to say this 25 years ago to someone, they go, no, that's just trucking. That's it. They aren't going to do that.
Yeah. Ryder's really interesting, right? We still think of them primarily truck leasing. That's the core business, but it's to the point where it's like maybe that's half of the business. The other half is all this dedicated transportation and logistics, supply chain solutions. And that includes e-commerce fulfillment division. They have been investing through that ventures arm and supporting innovators. You mentioned Manifest. I was there a couple of years back with the founder of Remora, which is a startup, an interesting startup, and they actually do carbon capture on the back of a truck. So rather than changing the whole powertrain.
Paul Gross, yeah.
Yes, rather than changing the whole powertrain.
I'm talking to him next. I think I'm talking to him next week. I've interviewed.
Yeah, you should check up on that and ask how this is going.
Yeah, they're carbon capture, and great company. I love what they're doing.
It's a very unique approach that Ryder was bullish on, and they put some.
They just raised another round.
Yeah, so
that's why we're talking.
Yeah, and these are like the big incumbents in the transportation industry that are supporting it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think they're based in Michigan, not too far from me. I think they came, I don't know if Paul is, but I think a number of the people at that company are from University of Michigan. Yeah, it's very interesting time. Getting back to your list, we can't go over all of these, but we got in the rankings, Logistics 100, that's just the logistics company. Then we have freight brokerage, and we have dry storage warehousing. I'm not going to go over all of these. I'll just hit some of the top of the dry store warehousing is Amazon, DHL, Ryder, GXO, NFI, Geodis. I get that. FedEx, Kenco. And then you've got, refrigerated warehousing. Oh, all right.
That is an interesting spot. Yeah.
Lineage. Now, again, that's another Michigan company. Not that it matters, but they're about 20 minutes from me. They have offices worldwide, though.
There's a lot of supply chain transportation in the Midwest, of course. People say Chicago, but it's actually the greater Midwest, really.
Yeah. Yeah, on the refrigerated side, it's Lineage, Americold, Penske, RLS, ODW, STG, Kenco. A lot of big names there.
Yeah, especially those top two, Lineage and Americold, have emerged as the two giants in cold storage.
And they're growing through acquisition. Am I right to say that?
100%, yeah. And they're really buying up a lot of smaller companies, not just around the country, but globally.
Yes.
And Lineage just went public last year. And it was the biggest IPO of 2024.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's huge. If you look at our rankings, the Lineage is up to, I believe, number 12. I don't know who can check it first while we're on the podcast, but they keep on moving up the ranking. Yeah, number 12, and headquarters is Novi, Michigan. Yeah, to your point.
It's Novi.
Novi, thank you. I'm from Ohio, not Michigan. I don't know. I pronounce Lima, Ohio correctly. Everybody else say Lima, Ohio.
Oh yeah, I worked for a company. It was a technology company out of Mountain View, but we had an office in Novi, and then they would always say the Novi office, and we all go Novi.
Thank you for the correction.
By the way, it's an interesting name. It's Novi, Novi, It was a train stop that was number 6.
Is that really what it was? Huh.
So people would go, oh, yeah, that's Novi. No, it's number 6 on the train stop. Little stupid Michigan lore. Anyway, so there's some big changes in the refrigerated. Then you have dedicated, that's dedicated trucking.
Yep. And this is another one where, again, this is the
You just split it all out.
the most comprehensive view of logistics, 3PL services. So this is an asset-based logistics service. We also look at dedicated trucking in our for-hire carriers as well. But we do include this as part of our logistics rankings as well. And you see all the usual suspects at the top there.
And I should also mention, this is obviously this much more than just one list. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lists. And then on top of that, there's on the same page a whole bunch of articles. Like one here is top 100 3PLs face slow growth, trade uncertainty. We obviously put uncertainty in our title. And so you guys have not just provided a list, which is hard enough, but you also wrote some of the trends,
context,
some of the stuff.
Trends. Yeah. So this publication, these really are our chance to really zoom out the aperture of the lens. And so much of what we do at Transport Topics is turn of the screw. What's the latest development? What's the breaking news? What's happening here and there? Company reports earnings. What's happening big picture when you look at it? What's happened in the last year for this huge segment of the transportation industry for 3PLs? That's what this is. You can almost think of it as like an almanac or like a mini yearbook for the industry. So we really try to capture the trends and the context, right? It's not just a bunch of numbers. What do the numbers mean? So we're really trying to orient the reader. And we hope that this is a resource that people keep around.
No, it totally is.
It's not something you look at once and you're done with.
And there's another one, interactive map, where are the top 100 headquartered. It's interesting to see what the big guys are happening to them. And then when you hear, we just talked about Lineage making a lot of acquisitions and then going public. It's another public company. 20 years ago, there was very few publicly traded logistics companies. Now there's a lot more. If you look at the world's billionaires, there's a lot more came from logistics now than in the past. It was, again, I think it was an overlooked industry. And we obviously grew during the global, as the world went global. And I think we're going to continue to grow. I think big supply chains recognize the value of having these logistics partners. And the lines have really blurred because you mentioned Ryder. I'm in Detroit area. I thought Ryder did virtually all. Ryder or Penske seemed to have all automotive work. Everywhere you went, any factory you went to, you're like, now it might have been a Ryder leased vehicle, but they're Ryder everywhere. At one time, I think 80% of their business was automotive. And I thought they were based in Michigan. And when I learned they were based in Miami, I was like, how? What are you kidding me? But good for them. But now they've grown way beyond automotive. They're into e-commerce. It's amazing what these big companies have done. But I think it's also instructive for the smaller guys to say, why are they moving into that space? There's a reason. And I think if by reading some of these articles you guys created, you get some insights on that.
Yeah, I really hope it is helpful, not just for the companies that are on the list to see where they stack up. I think it's helpful also just for mid-sized companies, small business to understand where the industry's headed, how's the landscape changing. You can get some insights into where the industry's headed. And you do see in trucking and logistics, the giants and the innovators who tend to be maybe the first movers, but there are a lot of fast followers as well. And you want to catch the trends early, not be racing to try to catch up.
So are we going to see more consolidation, do you think, in 2025?
Most likely. It's a tough industry right now. It's a tough market. And we've seen every year a few big moves on the chessboard. I'm sure we'll see more of that. That's asset-based and 3PLs, brokers, for sure. I do think that will continue. Still a very fragmented industry. I think it'll, by necessity, remain that way for a long time, but it will consolidate. I have no doubt.
Yeah, and it's also the last FTC and last administration was not particularly friendly to mergers and acquisitions. I don't think the Trump administration is going to slow that down at all. And I think so. There was a little pent up demand on, can we do this? And I think we're going to see that. And again, I think it's going to be very interesting as we reposition these supply chains to see what new services pop up, because there's going to be a need, because it's going to be very different kind of production and manufacturing, because it's going to be largely robotic, much more automation, much more automated than it was in the past. We don't have a huge group of people who are clamoring to go work into these factories. We got used to the cushy jobs.
Yeah, I think it was Dave Chappelle who said that Americans like to wear Nikes, not make them. So some of these jobs, yeah, we want to attract some of I think the high tech jobs that are in China. You see high end manufacturing. That'd be great to have here. Maybe not some of the really basic labor that could be automated. That's our superpower in the US, I think, for manufacturing is our.
We're one of the countries in the world that is pretty self-contained. We don't actually need to work with anyone else. It's a very large market. We have the technology, we have the people, but we did it. And not every country is like that. There's a lot of countries that have to import and have to export. We don't necessarily have to, but I think you're going to see the stuff that has to move, not has to move. Stuff that's going to move is going to be the stuff related to security. So your electronics, anything related to energy. I think you'll see automotive move back, shipbuilding. You're going to see some of that stuff move back. And again, hopefully those are good jobs for the people here. Anyway, enough of my blather. I know this is just winging it here, Seth, but do you think 2025 will be better than 2024 for these companies and for the industry as a whole too?
Yeah, I would love to offer a definitive answer on that. I really can't, because not even I can't even. It's hard for me to even tip the hat one way or the other. It's the environment is very foggy. We just don't know how things are going to play out with trade. This is about the most uncertain time that people can remember in business, who have been in it for many years and decades. It's just so much unsettled right now. I think the hope would be that we can get to some sort of new set of rules and equilibrium for global trade sooner rather than later. And that hopefully can unlock businesses' pent-up demand and really move forward. When that happens, we'll see. I'm certainly not going to put on an economist hat, but hopefully we dodge a recession. There have been some fears about that. It seems like there's been some de-escalation in the trade war with the 90-day pause with China. Hopefully it certainly looks like that has calmed things down a little bit and maybe made that less of a concern, less of a imminent threat. But I really have a hard time projecting when we'll see a nice rebound in the freight market. It felt like we were going to see late last year. It felt like we're going to see a kind of a steady climb out of this trough that we're in. Not like a great rebound, but or a surge, but a steady growth environment, even if it's slow. That will happen eventually, but it feels like we've slowed things down even more, and that pause button has been hit by too many businesses lately, to say for sure.
Kevin Hill tracks over at Brush Pass Research. He tracks how many freight brokerages are net growing or slowing down or going out of business. And I think last month we lost 15 companies, which was relatively small. So that means the delta is only lost 15. He was losing a lot more than that. There was hundreds going out of business every month. I will also say I saw the talking heads over the weekend, and they said the economic data coming out, like the jobs report, don't look real bad. They look good, actually. And it's funny what you said, and I totally agree with you. We have this uncertainty. Everyone's sitting on their hands, yet we have good data on the economy. But just because they're saying it doesn't mean we feel it.
This is true.
And I think also because of COVID, we ended up with a 30% increase in costs. I think if everybody's saying, God, I say this all the time. I used to go to restaurants and never pay attention to what it costs. Just go, so it's relatively cheap to eat out. Now I don't feel that way.
Look at those checks a little bit more closely than in the past and read all the line items. Like, hey, am I being charged a surcharge here? What is that?
Anyway, I'm going to summarize and I want to get your final thoughts on the topics, Seth. So I'm talking to my friend Seth Clevenger he's the managing editor of features and multimedia over at Transport Topics. And every year they put together this list of the top 100 logistics companies, Freight brokerages is a separate list. Dry storage, separate list. Refrigerator warehousing, dedicated. Ocean freight and air freight. And on top of that, there's a whole bunch of articles providing a little bit of context and insights on that list. I highly recommend it. I'll make sure I put a link in the show notes to that. I'll also make sure if you give it to me, Seth, I'll put a link to your podcast so we can check that out. I think you have 2 podcasts. So if you could send those both over, we'll check those out. And give me a link to your LinkedIn profile so people can follow you over there. If you're connected to Seth on LinkedIn, he's always posting. I just was looking this morning, and every conference they get to, it seems like you guys go to all the conferences and they always have takeaways from it, which is great because none of us can get to all these damn conferences. And by the way, I say damn conferences, they're wonderful. That's why we want to go to them all.
Yeah. Try to distill it down and at least get the top takeaways for sure.
Anyway, so we covered a whole bunch of some of the changes year over year. We talked a little bit about performance. The look ahead is murky. Anyway, put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on this topic, Seth Clevenger.
Yeah, maybe I'll just wrap up here with maybe a word of advice. And I think this is super high level, but generalized. But I think that the value of 3PLs moving forward is going to be in their adaptability. There was a time, I think 2021, when a freight broker would be busier than they can handle simply by having access to truck capacity. Those days are gone. We're in a tight capacity, really overcapacity situation and have been for some time. The 3PLs that are going to stand out right now are the ones that are going to help their shippers figure out this mess, this uncertainty, navigate it. Supply chain people at big shippers are they want to understand, how do I need to adjust my supply chains? What can I do that's nimble, as a fast response to tariffs? And what's going to be a longer term play? And how do I find the people and connect with the people that I need to connect with to make this happen? That 3PLs who are doing that are going to be really well positioned, and 3PLs that can adjust, right? Because we don't know what the future is going to look like, but if you can pivot, if you can adjust to where the market is headed, that flexibility, I think, is going to be maybe your greatest virtue, your greatest asset in business in this environment for the foreseeable future. Being able to adapt and evolve and grow with your customers as we try to figure out what the new world looks like. If you can't adapt, if you're stuck in your ways and you can't pivot, maybe you'll get lucky and it pivots your way and business shifts your way, but you might find yourself in a really challenging position. That's my number one takeaway. My number one advice is uncertain times, and that calls for flexibility, the ability to adapt to help your customers navigate this.
I love it. I love it. Seth, what conferences will we see you and the fine folks from Transport Topics at?
Yes, a little bit of the summer doldrums right now. I will be at some of the tech conferences over the summer into the fall, Samsara, Trimble, McLeod. I will be at the American Trucking Association's conference, management conference and exhibition in San Diego. It's in October. Planning to go to IANA, Intermodal Association North America, in Long Beach.
Oh, I will see you at IANA, and I'm also going to Trimble. Trimble's in...
They pushed it back this year. It's November in New Orleans. So
yeah, I'll see you there.
We have some nice meals in New Orleans.
Yes. And I'm excited for the IANA conference too, just because there's just so much volatility in the intermodal space.
Yeah, I think the timing is great for a show like IANA. It's it's front lines.
And that, by the way, IANA is Intermodal Association North America, and they're doing some great stuff over there.
Yeah. And they see a lot of this front row.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of this. So it's a valuable conference, I think, for the whole industry.
Yeah. Excellent. Seth, thanks so much for taking the time. I love your list, and I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through. God, this is, I think, until you go and look at the list and I get to talk to you, but you don't recognize how difficult it is to categorize our industry. We are not easy to put in boxes.
No, it's getting harder and harder by the year, and we struggle sometimes. We have a lot of decisions to make, and the lines are so blurred. Yeah,
it'll be the AI logistics company.
Yeah, it might be a whole new category. We'll see. Virtual logistics. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for taking the time, Seth.
I always appreciate it. It's a great conversation.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.